Hello, I'm Nobby. Welcome to my workshop. The next part I want to make for the Ellie steam tram is the burner. The burner from the illustration in the book looks like that. There's a couple of pictures of it there. It's basically made out of brass tube and sheet brass, and a couple of bits made out of sort of solid brass as well, machined. Now unfortunately the plans in the book for the construction of this are not to scale, so it's a bit difficult to get a good idea of how long some of the parts should be. So I've drawn out the same drawing that's in the book, but actually made it to scale. Now what isn't completely plain in the drawings is that you've got here, this is the fuel tank, which is 35 millimeters tall, and it appears that the wick tubes here are just a fraction taller than the tank, which will put these just above the floor of the engine itself. So obviously the wicks will stick up a little bit higher, obviously, but there's the distance between the bottom of the boiler and the floor of the tram is, from memory, 25 millimeters. So I'm assuming that distance is enough for the wicks to heat up the boiler itself, but I'm not absolutely clear on that. So I might have to sort of try and seek a bit of advice on that side of it, because when you mount the burner from below the floor of the tram, and the top of the tank here makes contact with the underside of the floor. So I've got to sort of just check what the actual height of these ideally should be. Anyway, I'm going to start by making the tank itself. It says you can make this either out of sheet brass or individual plates of brass. The thickness of the tank apparently is not that important, so I've opted to make it out of some sheet brass, which I actually already have. Some years ago I was at a model engineering exhibition. There was a guy there selling all sorts of bits and pieces, and he had this sort of quite old sheet of brass, which I was able to buy quite cheaply. So what I needed to do was to cut out here, you see it looks pretty scruffy, but it will clean up obviously, was to cut out a piece of that brass sheet big enough to fold up and make the tank. Before I did that, what I did was made a cardboard version of it first, so that I could sort of bend it into shape, just to see basically what it looked like and how it could all be soldered into position. I've left little tabs on here, you see, which I guess could go inside. Whether that's a good idea or not, I'm not sure, but I thought that having the sides cut exactly to the width held together, it might be quite difficult to sort of clamp this together while you're actually soldering. I thought perhaps by having these little tabs, it could still be held in position, and then perhaps soldered from the outside, so that the solder would have more of an area to adhere to. Whether that's going to work or not, I don't know at this stage, but let's see how we get on anyway. Now obviously cutting this out of a big sheet of brass was going to be quite a task to do with the hacksaw, but luckily what I have, something I picked up from a car sale some years ago, was this device. It's made by a company called Monodex, and it's actually a nibbler. I'm sure a lot of you have seen these before. It just unhooks at the end here, and you see it's got these sort of flat parts to the end here, and if you can see that a little blade comes up, so you can run this carefully, if you can see that properly, carefully along the edge, so you get whichever way you're tackling this, one edge or the other, in line with the size markings you put on the plate, and sort of run that along. It curls up the bits of brass like this. Quite attractive little things, aren't they? But this, although it's quite hard and makes your hand ache, it did the job very, very well indeed. These apparently are used quite a lot by people that build sort of cabinets for electronics work, and to cut thin sheets of probably aluminium, where they're fabricating a box perhaps to put components in. But I mean, I've had this for quite a long time. I only used it once or twice before, but it was not terribly expensive. Monodex, made in England. And I hadn't seen one of these for many, many years. When I worked many years back in London, the company I worked for, we had an electronics repair shop, and they had one of these among the tools they had there, which, you know, it didn't get an awful lot of use, but that's really how I knew about this. I know you can buy electrically operated nibblers, but it's not really worth my while having one of those just for sort of occasional use. But anyway, that's how I cut this sheet out. I use the, if you like, this is going to be the template. I use that to glue up the sheet so that I can scribe all the lines on it, so I can sort of mark all these lines out, sort of ready to cut out, and do all the folding. Cutting, I've got a number of options. I have got these are sort of big heavy duty snips that I can use. I've also got another pair of snips which will cut this. See if I can find it. These are made by Stanley. They don't look as though they're man enough for the job, but they are actually incredibly strong. So part of it, I might be able to cut some of it with it. I'll try various methods to actually cut this out. And I've just received the brass tubing on the drawing. There are two sizes of brass tubing. This is obviously a side view. You've got a 10mm diameter piece here, and then joining that part to the tank, you've got a 6mm tube, and then along the top of this tube you've got 4 little burner tubes, which again are 6mm. So hopefully out of the tubing I've got here, this is solders, I think they call it hobby tubing, which I hope is going to be sort of strong enough for the job. A couple of 300mm lengths. Obviously I don't need a lot of the 10mm material, but I've got to get the long piece here, and which is about just over 70mm long, and 4 of these, whichever length they're going to end up being, out of this piece of tube. So I mean, I hope that's going to be enough. If not, I'll just have to order another piece. But hopefully the money that I've got enough to actually do the job now. So I'm going to get on with marking this out. I don't think there's any point in filming that, because it's difficult enough to do, and let alone trying to film it as well. But I'll mark this out and just show you what it looks like after I've marked it out, and then I'll proceed to sort of cut all the unwanted parts out of this. So I'll bring you back for that part a little bit later on. Well, that's where I'm at the moment. I've marked everything out now. I started off, this was actually my straight edge to start with, but of course this wasn't cut out that accurately out of the sheet, and I made sure I at least had one edge that was nice and straight. So what I had to do before I could mark everything else out in this sort of horizontal direction, obviously all the verticals were from that edge, I had to trim this edge off first, and I've marked it here, so I've got a straight edge and a 90 degree here, so that I could do all the markings across that way. So everything is marked out now, and in some positions you see I've got the extra line here, which would be the part that could be folded in to sort of help sort of make all the joints. Obviously once that's cut out, obviously I'd need to sort of notch into each little corner here so that it would fold neatly. Quite how I'm going to fold this, I'm not sure yet. I've got the option obviously of, because it's reasonably thick material. I've not measured it to see what the thickness is, but when I cut this edge off, I actually cut it with the Stanley cutters. That seemed to work okay. So I think that I'll sort of proceed. Also, I'm going to do this bit off camera. It's a job I can do actually sitting down and relaxing while I do it. Obviously I've got to be sort of very, very careful how I cut all this out, but that will be the next job. So folding, also as I mentioned, I've either got the option of lining up these lines here in the vise. I've also got this tool, which I think is sort of used for sort of welding, so I thought it might be possible that I could, this is like a sort of a mole grip type thing, is using that against the edge to fold it. Not quite sure yet. I know there are special tools like this available. They're more like a pair of pliers with these flat plates on. I think they're sort of more or less a vintage tool if you can ever find them. I have been looking out for something like that, but so far I've never found one, so that's another option that I could use. But I have got a scrap piece of this material. When I cut it out, there was a little scrap piece which I'm going to use to test out doing the folds, also to test out drilling the various holes that are required in this, to take the pipe fittings and the fixture fittings and so forth. So I've got, sort of obviously scrap material to play around with there. But anyway, once I've got a bit further ahead with this, I'll bring you back. Well, I've cut all the parts out. Trying to keep as close to the line as I possibly can. If there's any errors, I'm going to measure it up, and I can always run a file along the edge, or a piece of emery paper just to clean it all up. Although when it's all sort of bent to shape, the joints aren't really going to be seen very much anyway, and when the engine's running you won't even see the tank itself, because I mentioned that I had a piece of scrap brass left over, and of course, completely forgetting, when I cut all these out, I was left with a handful of brass bits and where I'd got lines on a lot of them anyway, I did a sort of a practice on bending one of the edges over just to see how good a bend I could get in it. It's quite reasonable. I did this by clamping it in the vise against the line in here. My workshop bench vise has actually got aluminium jaws on it. I've replaced the steel ones with aluminium, which are still reasonably sharp. I first sort of literally bent this over against a piece of wood by hand. It bent quite easily, and then to try and get it into a sort of a nice shape, I kept it in the vise and very, very gently tapped along here with a lead hammer, which doesn't seem to have caused any damage to it, and I've got quite a reasonable bend all along this, so I'm hoping that may work out okay for me in sort of bending all these bits to shape. Obviously I've got to think about it very carefully on which bits I bend first. So I mean that's obviously the base, the four sides, that's going to be the lid. I think the lid will probably be the last part I shall bend, because obviously I'm going to need not to sort of enclose this excuse me, completely. I've really got to solder up what will be these joints first, and then probably do the lid last. What I will probably also do excuse me, is drill the various holes in it. There'll be one hole either here or here, which will take the little 6mm pipe, which will feed the burners themselves. And in the lid, obviously it'll be this way around, the lid will have a hole on one side which will have a tube in it, which will be the filler, so you can pour in the methylated spirits into the burner. And then on the other side there'll be a little stud, which will, when this is all folded up, sort of like this, with the lid, there'll be, I've marked it on here, there'll be the filler cap will be here, filler tube rather, and there'll be a little stud in the centre, a solid stud, with a cross hole drilled through it, so that these will both go up through holes in the floor of the engine, and as it goes up the little stud will go through, and there's a little pin goes through the hole which will suspend the tank and hold it in place. So that obviously that cross hole's got to be drilled very accurately so that there's no tipping of the tank itself. It's got to sort of hold it positively in place, and then the little filler obviously will stick, I don't know, sort of 10mm above here, so you can pour the methylated spirits in to fill it up. And apparently the method of sealing that off is to use a little wooden plug. The plug will have a groove down one side which allows some air to get into the tank, so that the methylated spirits will flow through into the burner, which will obviously sort of stick out from here, or be sort of out here somewhere. So that's going to be the next bit to do, is to start bending these bits up. As I've got sort of plenty of little spare bits of this, I'm going to do a bit of practicing. What I'm also going to do is to drill the two sizes of holes required, one being the 10mm hole and the 6mm hole, to make sure I've got a drill which will give me a reasonably close fit for the two diameters of brass tube which will go through. So I'll do that as well to make sure that I'm going to get a nice seal, not obviously not too tight, because you've got to allow for a bit of the silver solder to get round that as well. I'm going to get on with that. It's getting quite late in the day now, so I probably won't do any more today, but perhaps in another session I'll start bending this, but I might show you a bit of that to show you the progress I'm having. But I really want to think about this a bit first on the sort of order that I bend these parts, because I imagine probably bending along these first, because if I can't really bend these because it will stop me clamping that in the vise to make the bends along here. So what I may have to do is bend all of these parts over, and then perhaps bend these. May still be able to do that in the vise. I'm not sure. I just have to see how I get on. But then the other option, of course, is perhaps using that mold grip tool to grip each part. We'll just have to sort of work that out as I go along. Anyway, I'll leave it at that just for the moment. There's something that I actually omitted to mention in the book. They make a suggestion that you make a wooden former to help you with bending this into shape. And I had done that. It just didn't occur to me to mention that earlier on, but I made a wooden block of the correct dimensions for the tank itself, so that would sort of fit in there. I've got to sort of check that it is, well, no, it's a sort of near to the size. So the idea being that when this is folded, you can use this to sort of hold everything in position. Obviously you've got to be really careful you don't get this stuck inside the tank when you're doing it. So whether perhaps you put some sort of cardboard against the edges, I'm not quite sure what the best thing to do, but this is, I've very sort of carefully cut this out of a piece of, it's just pine to give you the size. So it's 55mm this way and 25mm across here, so that will sort of go inside the tank. Obviously I've obviously made this a lot longer, so I've got something to grip to get it out. So it occurred to me that possibly not putting a full bend on all of these parts, perhaps bending one side up to this to get that in shape, and then sort of very lightly bending the ends, and then sort of bring it all into position. I could probably also use clamps. Well, I mean, I'll need to use clamps to hold it all in position while it's soldered, but this should help to form the overall shape of the boiler. I didn't mean to mention this earlier, but I put it on one side and I didn't spot it on the bench, so I hadn't mentioned it at that point. But that's something that they do suggest in the instructions for making the tank itself. So that's obviously going to be a great help. But you see that I've made it quite a bit taller than the size there, so there's plenty to sort of grip onto. So in fact I did use that when I made this little paper version of it as well, and in fact to sort of check that everything was okay, I folded all this up and then sort of taped around it just to see what it looked like, and it all seemed to be fine. So just another bit ready to show you, but obviously that will get used a bit later on in the construction of the tank. Well, it's been a gap of a few days since the last part of this sequence. I've been working on another small project in between, which at this point I probably would have already shown you possibly. But what I'm going to do now is drill the various holes in this plate before I bend it to shape. Mentioning the gap in time, the other problem has been that the weather has been very, very hot over the last few days, particularly my workshop, which is, I've mentioned before, is all metal construction. And a lot of days it's been well over 30 degrees in here. And on one particular day, probably the hottest day we've had in end of June, July, it was way over 40 degrees. So really far too hot to come in the workshop. But there we are. I've just had to sort of find other things to do in the house, which is... we've tried to keep as cool as possible. Anyway, what I'm going to do is drill the holes. There'll be one hole I've marked out here, this is one of the sides of the tank. This will be a 6mm hole, and that is the pipe which goes from the tank to the burner itself. This is the lid. There'll be a 10mm hole here, which will take the feed pipe to the tank, where you fill the tank with methylated spirits. On the drawings, it shows this central hole here being 8mm in diameter. This takes a stud which goes up through the floor of the engine. The drawing shows the hole in the floor of the engine being 8mm as well. So I'm going to drill this slightly smaller. I'll drill this 6mm as well, so that I can put a piece of brass bar in here, so it will drop down into here to a shoulder. The bar will be I guess around about 8mm in diameter, whatever material I've got, so that when I drop the little stud in here, obviously it will be from this side when it's being soldered, so it will drop down to a stop position, so it will hold in place while it's soldered into position. So all these parts are marked out. I'll just centre punch all of these positions and then drill the various holes out. So that will be the next thing to do. drilled at the 6mm hole in the middle here, which will be for the stud, and then the hole next to it, I've drilled that the same size 6mm as well, but now I need to open that up to 10mm for the larger tube, which will take the filler tube. So I've got a 10mm drill in here now. Try and get that lined up as best I can. Let's hope this goes well. Just drilling into very thin material is always difficult anyway, even more difficult because it's brass and could very, very easily grab the material as well. So I've got to be very, very cautious in how I do this. But anyway, I'm wearing gloves just in case anything nasty happens while I'm doing this, and I've got the material clamped down very, very tightly into my finger plate as well, and I've got a piece of MDF underneath so that I don't drill too far down and damage the table on the bench drill as well. So trying to sort of line that up as carefully as I can, and let's see how we go now. So I hope you can actually see what I'm doing. Try and keep my sort of hands out of the way if I can. Let's proceed. It is grabbing the material, so I think we need to do something else here. I'm going to see if this particular trick works or not. I've got that lined up. I'm going to put a piece of cloth over the hole. That hopefully will stop the drill from grabbing onto the material. Let's see if this actually works. Yep, does the job. It's drilled a very, very nice hole. It's a very, very useful old-fashioned or old-timey trick to drilling holes in very, very thin material. There's been a couple of people that have shown this trick on YouTube, but I remember being shown how to do this by my father for drilling in very, very thin material, so it's produced quite a nice cut. I think I'm going to do the same with this hole here. This one worked out okay. I may need to get the tube to go into here nicely. Well, not that one, that's for the stud, but to go into here, and the hole I'm going to drill on this side may need to be opened up slightly so the tube slides in to a nice fit that the solder will flow around it as well. I'll get it set up now to do this hole here, and we'll do the same trick using a thin piece of cloth. I'm sure most of you know this particular trick anyway, but obviously it's worked very, very well in this instance. In fact, I had to buy a new 10mm drill. I've got very, very nice drills and a lot of cobalt drills in all sorts of different sizes, but the 10mm drills I've got were not very nice at all, and one of them, which seemed to be the best one, it to me did seem to have a bit of a wobble to it as well, so I ordered this one up separately. So now I've got a really nice 10mm high-speed steel cobalt drill for exercises like this. I've got a set of cobalt drills going from 1mm up to 6mm, and I've got a lot of odd sizes of real high quality drills, but I didn't have a 10mm. I've got a 10.5. It's too big, but now I've got a nice drill to put in my drill collection. Anyway, I'll get set up for the other hole now. Well, we're set up now to drill the other hole. This is in what will be the side of the tank, and this takes the little 6mm tube that goes up to the four wick burners, but the other side. So just sort of line that. I'm just going to spot drill this first. That's it. Let's drop this right down so I can get the bigger drill in. So this has got to be 6mm. See, I'm using my nice cowl bench drill here. This is, apart from being such a nice drill to use, it's very quiet as well, which is obviously for filming is very good as well. So we'll line that up. I'm going to do the same thing again and use a piece of cloth underneath here, which hopefully will produce, you know, the same result that I got with the 10mm hole as well. And I mention this, you probably get fed up with me mentioning the finger plate. This is such a useful thing to have for jobs like this, to be able to clamp down material very firmly while you're drilling holes. And another thing I found very, very useful is when you set this up on the table of the drill, is to make sure that you've got the sort of the side of the finger plate against the column of the drill, so that when you're drilling items, if there's any likelihood of the drill grabbing the material and spinning this round, it will hit the column first or be held by the column. So hopefully that would, you know, save any possibility of any accidents as well. Just a tip that I'm sure you all know this anyway. Make sure I've got that lined up nice. Put a little bit of cloth over there and hope that this does the same nice job again. Whoops. That's it. There we are. So that again's produced a very nice hole in there as well. Just drop that down a little bit. It's still in frame okay, I think. Take the drill out. Always remove the drills or any cutting tools first. Let's raise that up again a bit. Is that actually in view? Yes, it is. So now we can release that, and it's made a nice job of that as well. Obviously you're going to get slight burrs on the back, but I can go around all these holes with a countersink bit and just sort of clean each side up. So that's our the holes are all drilled in there now. We've got as I'd already mentioned, this will be at the when that's folded up, that will be at the bottom of the side of the tank, so there'll be a pipe going out from here to the burner part itself, and in the lid here you've got the hole for the feed, and the one here for the stud, which will mount it onto the underside of the floor of the engine itself. Apart from just sort of cleaning the burrs up, the next stage I guess is going to be bending all of these shapes. I've because I've not been in the workshop very much over the last week, I've been able to give it a lot of thought on how I'm going to do this, but I think that because I didn't show a lot of getting to this stage beforehand, which I should have done really, I should have shown you perhaps cutting some of this shape out, sorry about that, and marking out. What I want to do is to show you the sort of process I'm hoping to achieve in bending these shapes out. But I'm going to save that for the next video along really, because that'll be quite a long job to do anyway. So I'll bring this video to an end now. So again, thanks very much for joining me in the workshop, and thanks also to all the subscribers to the channel and all the nice comments and advice that I'm getting. I mean, I know that I'm showing various processes that I'm doing here, and I'm no expert. I've had no training whatsoever in doing any workshop work or engineering at all, but it's just things that I've either discovered myself along the way or I've learnt from other people. So I'm hoping that some of these things will be useful to other people as well, perhaps just newly starting into the hobby, but there we are. Anyway, thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye for now.